strong. June 6, 1944. D-Day. The largest amphibious invasion in history. 156,000 men, 5,000 ships, the fate of the free world hanging by a thread. But what if that thread snapped? What if the Nazis won at Normandy? What if Hitler's Reich survived 1944? Let me take you through the alternate timeline that came terrifyingly close to reality. Because, here's the truth, D-Day succeeded by pure luck. And I'm going to show you exactly how close we came to losing everything. The butterfly effect. History turned on a single phone call that never happened. In our timeline, Field Marshal Erwin Rommel left his post at the Atlantic Wall on June 5th. He drove to Germany to celebrate his wife's birthday and to personally ask Hitler for more panzer divisions. When the invasion began at dawn on June 6th, the Desert Fox was 500 miles away. But imagine this. Rommel's staff officer convinces him to delay the trip by just one day. The weather forecast shows storms in the Channel. Surely the Allies won't invade in a storm. Rommel agrees to wait. That decision changes everything. When the first paratroopers drop at 1:30 a.m., Rommel is awake, alert, and ready. He immediately recognizes this isn't a diversion. This is the real invasion. And unlike in our timeline, he doesn't need to call Hitler's headquarters and beg permission to move the panzers. He acts. By 3 a.m., the 21st Panzer Division is rolling toward the coast. The 12th SS Panzer Division follows. These aren't the depleted, scattered forces that arrive too late in our timeline. These are concentrated, coordinated, and commanded by Germany's best general. The Allies have no idea what's coming. Omaha Beach, the slaughter. At 6:30 a.m., the first wave hits Omaha Beach. In our timeline, this was already the bloodiest beach. Men drowned under the weight of their equipment. Machine gun fire cut down entire units before they reached the sand. Officers died within minutes. But the Americans held on. They found gaps in the defenses. By late afternoon, they pushed inland. In the alternate timeline, there are no gaps. Rommel positioned additional artillery on the bluffs overnight. The 352nd Infantry Division, which was supposed to be on training exercises inland, is instead at full strength behind the beaches. And at 8 a.m., just as the Americans are trying to reorganize, the first panzers arrive. Tiger tanks rolling onto a beach crowded with landing craft. It's not a battle. It's an execution. The American commander, General Omar Bradley, watches through binoculars from the USS Augusta. He sees his men trapped between the sea and German armor. He sees landing craft exploding. He sees the water turning red. At 10 a.m., he makes the hardest decision of his life. He orders the evacuation of Omaha Beach. But evacuating under fire is chaos. Landing craft that approach the beach are destroyed. Men swim out to sea, hoping to be picked up. Most drown. Others are cut down by machine gun fire. By noon, Omaha Beach is a graveyard. 15,000 American casualties. Almost no one made it off the beach alive. The news spreads through the invasion fleet like wildfire. If Omaha has fallen, what about the other beaches? The dominoes fall. Utah Beach holds for a while. The 4th Infantry Division pushes inland, not knowing that Omaha has collapsed. But by early afternoon, German forces from Omaha are moving north to encircle them. The Americans realize they're cut off and begin a fighting retreat back to the beaches. At Sword Beach, British forces face a similar nightmare. The 21st Panzer Division, which in our timeline arrived disorganized and late, instead hits the British with overwhelming force. The Guards Armored Division can't land because the beach is under constant artillery fire. Juno and Gold Beaches see some success. Canadian forces establish a beachhead. British troops push inland, For a moment, it looks like the invasion might survive. Then, Rommel makes his masterstroke. Instead of trying to contain all 5 beaches, he concentrates everything on cutting off the successful landings. He creates a corridor of fire between the beaches, preventing reinforcements from linking up. The Canadians and British forces that made it inland are now isolated pockets, surrounded by converging German divisions. By nightfall, on June 6th, Supreme Allied Commander Dwight Eisenhower faces the unthinkable. The invasion is failing. Casualties are approaching 50,000. No secure beachhead exists. German reinforcements are pouring in from across France. At midnight, Eisenhower sends the message he had already written in our timeline, taking full responsibility for the defeat. But in our timeline, he never had to send it. In this timeline, he does. Operation Neptune, The Retreat. June 7, 1944. The Allied Armada begins the largest evacuation since Dunkirk. It's chaos. Ships are trying to extract troops under constant German artillery fire and Luftwaffe bombing runs. The RAF fights desperately to maintain air superiority, but German fighters are launching from airfields just minutes away. The evacuation takes 3 days. 3 days of hell. When it's over, 45,000 Allied soldiers are dead. Another 30,000 are captured. The beaches of Normandy are littered with burned-out tanks, sunken landing craft, and bodies that will wash up on shore for weeks. Winston Churchill addresses Parliament on June 10th. His famous eloquence fails him. He simply says, "We have suffered a great defeat, but we will fight on." In Washington, Roosevelt faces a firestorm. Republicans demand his resignation. After years of sacrifice, after promises of victory, the greatest military operation in history has ended in catastrophic failure. But the political crisis is nothing compared to what happens next. Stalin's fury. Joseph Stalin doesn't believe in bad luck. He believes in betrayal. For 2 years, he begged the Western Allies to open a second front in Europe. For 2 years, the Red Army bled while fighting 80% of the German military. And when the second front finally comes, it fails in less than 48 hours. Stalin is convinced it's deliberate. He believes Churchill and Roosevelt never intended to seriously fight Hitler. He thinks they want the Nazis and Soviets to destroy each other. On June 12th, Stalin recalls his ambassadors from London and Washington. He issues a statement accusing the Western Allies of cowardice and treachery. He hints that the Soviet Union might need to reconsider its alliances. The Grand Alliance is fracturing, and Hitler sees his opportunity. Hitler's gamble. The victory at Normandy buys Hitler something he desperately needs: time. By summer 1944, Germany's strategic position is hopeless. The Red Army is pushing west. Germany is running out of oil, running out of men, running out of everything. The Normandy invasion was supposed to be the beginning of the end. Instead, it becomes Hitler's greatest propaganda victory. Goebbels' propaganda machine goes into overdrive. The failed invasion is portrayed as proof that the Reich is invincible. German morale, which was crumbling, suddenly surges. Recruitment increases, factory production increases. The German people believe they can still win. But Hitler knows better. He knows the war is still unwinnable in the long term. The Soviet Union is too large, too determined, too willing to sacrifice millions. Eventually, the Red Army will reach Berlin, unless he changes the equation. On June 20th, Hitler recalls 60 divisions from France and sends them east. These aren't the depleted, demoralized units that fought in our timeline. These are battle-hardened troops, fresh from victory, with intact equipment and high morale. The Eastern Front is about to become even more of a nightmare. The Eastern Meat Grinder. July 1944. The Red Army is pushing through Belarus, heading for Poland. In our timeline, This was Operation Bagration, one of the Soviet Union's greatest victories. They destroyed Army Group Center and killed or captured 400,000 German soldiers. In the alternate timeline, it becomes a slaughter on both sides. The 60 divisions from France arrive just as the Soviet offensive begins. The Red Army runs into defensive positions that shouldn't exist. German forces that should have been destroyed are instead reinforced and resupplied. The battle for Belarus lasts 3 months instead of 3 weeks. Soviet casualties quadruple. The advance that should have reached Poland by August stalls in the swamps of Belarus. Stalin is furious but undeterred. He throws more divisions into the meat grinder. The Soviet Union has a nearly infinite supply of men. He'll trade 10 Soviet soldiers for every German if that's what it takes. By September, the Eastern Front has become a static war of attrition, reminiscent of World War I. Trenches, artillery barrages, poison gas, mass charges into machine gun fire. Both sides are bleeding to death. And in the West, the Allies are planning their next move. The failure at Normandy doesn't end Allied plans to invade Europe. It just delays them. Throughout summer 1944, the debate rages. Churchill wants to try again in France. General George Patton proposes an invasion through the Balkans. Some suggest waiting until 1945, when more troops and equipment are available. Eisenhower advocates for a completely different approach. Invade Norway, cut off Germany's iron ore supplies, and force Hitler to fight on a third front. By October, they settle on a plan. Operation Avalanche II, a massive invasion of southern France in spring 1945, supported by a simultaneous offensive through Italy. But there's a problem. The longer they wait, the stronger Germany's Atlantic Wall becomes. Rommel is using the breathing room to turn every beach in Europe into a fortress. And there's an even bigger problem: the atomic bomb. In our timeline, the first atomic bomb was ready by July 1945. It was used on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, ending the war with Japan. In the alternate timeline, the question becomes, do we use it on Germany? The debate in Washington is fierce. Some argue that atomic weapons should be reserved for Japan. Others say that if one bomb on Berlin could end the European war, it would save millions of lives. Roosevelt is torn. The weapon is so terrible, so unprecedented, that using it might make America a pariah. But the casualties from a second invasion could be even worse than Normandy. The decision is postponed. The bomb won't be ready until mid-1945 anyway. Focus on conventional plans first. But Hitler knows about the Manhattan Project. German intelligence has been tracking it for years, and he knows that if the Americans develop atomic weapons, the war is over. So he makes a desperate gamble. The Peace Feeler. November 1944. Through neutral Swedish diplomats, Hitler sends a message to Churchill and Roosevelt. The message is simple. The Reich is willing to negotiate a conditional peace. The terms? Germany withdraws from France and the Low Countries. In exchange, Germany keeps Poland, Czechoslovakia, and its eastern conquests. The Holocaust ends. German forces join the Western Allies in fighting the Soviet Union. It's a cynical, manipulative offer designed to exploit the fracture in the Grand Alliance. Churchill's immediate response is fury. He declares that Britain will never negotiate with Hitler under any circumstances. Unconditional surrender or nothing. But Roosevelt is more conflicted. American casualties from the failed Normandy invasion are politically toxic. His health is failing. The public is war-weary. And the Soviet Union is becoming increasingly hostile. What if Hitler's offer could end the war in Europe by Christmas? What if it saves American lives? What if the alternative is years more of grinding warfare? Roosevelt doesn't accept the offer, but he doesn't reject it immediately either. He asks for time to consult with his advisors. That hesitation changes everything. Stalin's decision. When Stalin learns that the Western Allies are even considering Hitler's peace offer, he goes ballistic. This confirms every paranoid suspicion he's ever had. The capitalist powers want to turn Germany against the Soviet Union. They're willing to let Hitler keep his ill-gotten gains as long as German tanks are pointed east instead of west. On November 15th, Stalin makes his own shocking announcement. The Soviet Union is willing to negotiate a separate peace with Germany. The world reels. After everything, after 27 million Soviet dead, after Stalingrad and Kursk, and 3 years of horrific warfare, is Stalin really going to make a deal with Hitler? Churchill frantically calls Roosevelt. They agree. They must reject Hitler's peace offer immediately and publicly. They must reassure Stalin that the alliance holds. But it's too late. Stalin no longer trusts them. And Hitler, watching this chaos unfold, realizes he has one more card to play. December 1944. The twist. What nobody expects is that Hitler doesn't want peace with the West. He wants peace with Stalin. The peace offer to the Western Allies was a feint. Hitler's real goal was to provoke exactly the response he got, to make Stalin believe the West might abandon him. On December 1st, through back channels, Hitler sends a secret offer to Stalin. The terms: Germany and the Soviet Union return to the borders agreed to in the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact of 1939. Poland is divided again. The war in the East ends. Germany focuses on defending Western Europe. The Soviet Union gets a free hand in the Balkans and Eastern Europe. It's insane. It's cynical. It means abandoning the Holocaust, abandoning Nazi ideology, abandoning everything Hitler claimed to believe in. But Hitler is dying. His health is collapsing from Parkinson's and drug addiction. He knows he won't live to see 1946. And he knows that Germany's only hope of survival is to end the two-front war. Stalin faces an impossible choice. Does he keep fighting a war that's killing hundreds of thousands of Soviet soldiers every month? Or does he make a deal with the devil and secure the Soviet Union's borders? On December 20th, 1944, Stalin shocks the world. He agrees to a ceasefire with Germany. The partition of Europe. The ceasefire becomes a formal peace treaty by January 1945. Europe is divided. Germany keeps France, Belgium, the Netherlands, Denmark, and Norway. The Soviet Union gets Poland, the Baltic states, Romania, Bulgaria, and Finland. Czechoslovakia becomes a buffer state, occupied by both powers. The Holocaust officially ends, but the concentration camps in the East simply become Soviet gulags. The prisoners trade one form of tyranny for another. The Western Allies are isolated. They still control Britain, the Mediterranean, and are advancing through Italy. But they've lost the race for Europe. Roosevelt, heartbroken and in declining health, dies in March 1945. Harry Truman becomes president and immediately faces the question, what does America do now? The atomic bomb is ready. Should it be used on Berlin? On Moscow? On both? Truman decides against it. Using atomic weapons might trigger a wider conflict. Instead, America focuses on winning the Pacific War and rebuilding its strength. By August 1945, Japan surrenders after atomic bombs fall on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The Pacific War ends. But in Europe, the uneasy peace holds. The world of 1946. By 1946, the world looks completely different. Nazi Germany survives, but it's a hollow shell. Hitler dies in January 1946. The Reich descends into internal power struggles. Himmler, Goering, and Speer fight for control. The economy is collapsing. The occupied territories are in constant revolt. The Soviet Union dominates Eastern Europe. Stalin's power is absolute. But the country is exhausted, depleted, and faces decades of rebuilding. The Western Allies control the Mediterranean, the Middle East, and have a strong presence in Italy and Greece. But they've lost the ideological war. They failed to stop Hitler. They failed to save the millions who died in the Holocaust. America turns inward. The returning soldiers demand answers. How did we lose? How did so many die for nothing? The 1946 midterm elections are a bloodbath for Democrats. And across the world, new tensions are forming. Not a Cold War between two superpowers, but a three-way standoff between America, Nazi Germany, and the Soviet Union. This is the world that almost was, a world where evil won, not through strength, but through luck and timing. The real lesson. Here's what haunts me about this alternate timeline. It was entirely plausible. If Rommel had been at the Atlantic Wall on June 6th, D-Day could have failed. The margin of success was razor thin. Entire landing zones nearly collapsed. The decision to proceed despite bad weather was a massive gamble. History classes teach D-Day as an inevitable Allied victory. But the men who were there knew better. They knew how close it came to disaster. Eisenhower wrote two speeches for June 6th. One announced victory. One accepted responsibility for defeat. He kept both in his pocket. That's how fragile history is. Every turning point in World War II came down to single decisions, lucky breaks, random chances. If Hitler had listened to his generals, if the Enigma code hadn't been broken, if the bomb plot of July 1944 had succeeded, any of these could have changed everything. The Nazi victory in the West didn't happen, but it could have. And understanding how close we came to losing isn't about fear. It's about appreciating how precious victory was. The 416,000 Allied soldiers who died in World War II didn't die for an inevitable victory. They died fighting against long odds, against a powerful enemy, without any guarantee of success. They earned the world we live in today. So when you hear about D-Day, remember, it wasn't destiny, it was courage, sacrifice, and yes, luck. And we're living in the timeline where the good guys won by the thinnest possible margin. That's the terrifying, inspiring, humbling truth of 1944.